They'll blanket you in Wi-Fi and profit off the radiation. Congregation collecting the people for that Satan. I keeps it blazing, cause I can read between the lines. I ain't blind, we unwind what they're really saying. Genetically modify what you're tasting. Don't need that cottage promise, so now you live up in your mom's basement. Redesign time so your mind is always wasted. Programmed to crave the basics. Keep the beta in stasis. Pay the state, kid. You're in debt for being born. Messengers are more than just the price for being warned. Don't be alarmed. Disconnect from their machinations. Stop subscribing to the folly of own nations. Bone breaking ain't the answer, cause they seek the ownership of souls. Spread the seeds and watch them grow. Break the chains of control. Break the chains of control.
So we, eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful friends. Tonight on Rogueways, we are very lucky, and I'm very stoked to welcome a transformational NLP life coach, writer, speaker, and author of Becoming Ridiculously Awesome. Who doesn't want that? As well as a practitioner of Huna. Is it Huna? I don't actually know.
It is Huna.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Which I've never even heard of, if you couldn't tell by me not being able to pronounce it. And so I'm very excited to learn about that and so many other things. Meredith, you're a very accomplished person, and thank you for being here tonight. How are you?
Doing very well. Thank you so much for having me, Lindsay.
It's awesome. And before we jump in, I do want to remind people that new book, All Endings Are Beginnings, are still on the site for direct from me, inscription and all, for a steal. There is new orgone pendants and jewelry up today on the shop, or maybe that was yesterday, at rogueways.org and all kinds of other things. So go check it out and support the show and get things that you love and things that are good for you. And then Meredith, back to you. The pointless question of the episode that I was going to ask you is, what is your favorite type of dance and why?
My favorite type of dance?
Or style, or like move, maybe. Yeah, that's not one that
I really like this question because we listen to music here all the time, and I have so many styles that I really like. I really love swing dance. I love swing dancing, but I've got to say, if I could want to learn a kind of dance, it would be Irish dancing, because I just think that's really darn cool.
Like river dancing?
Kind of like river dancing.
Doing it with my feet over here.
Right? It's awesome. So yes, that's kind of a dream dance that I would like to learn, but I do love swing dancing quite a bit.
Oh, that sounds so fun. I've always wanted to do swing dancing or something like that where you have to actually learn the moves, but I know zero dances. And so I'm just always so impressed when I see people dancing in specific styles. And I'm like, wow, you're so cool. Like, you learned all of that. And I just think it's so neat. So maybe someday I'll get there. But, so I guess just let's jump right in, Meredith. And first, I want to ask you, what was your childhood and life coming up like for you to have gotten into all of the amazing things that you've gotten into and to become a healer like you are?
Well, it was Pollyanna all day long.
Wow.
No, I'm kidding.
I was like, that seems so unlikely. Okay.
Exactly. So my childhood, great parents overall, have two older brothers. But what really happened was I was abused a little bit when I was young, and that just colored everything. And due to, through no fault of their own, because when a parent or anyone is faced with something that they've never experienced before, I'm not letting them off the hook, but I am understanding, especially now that I'm older and wiser and have worked through most of my stuff. I've come to a point where, look, they didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to handle it. There's no rule book for it. Yeah. It was also during the 80s where a lot of things are still swept under the rug, not understanding the psychology behind and the aftermath of it. So that really colored my world. And I, until I was really in my 20s and kind of going through shifting and growing, did I realize that I was kind of depressed my whole life. So I was like, wow, that was a bummer to not really notice and learn and get the help that I needed when I was younger. So that colored my world dramatically, and not having the open dialogue with my parents. Because if your parents can't acknowledge it, you don't know how to operate. You don't know how to go through it. You don't know how to think about it or feel about it and you don't know what's available to you.
Yeah.
So that was just behind closed doors and shot down until I was 28, when the guy who did that to me was fired for another reason, completely unrelated. So there were a lot of anger issues that I had to deal with. So yeah, so that was kind of that. Other than that, honestly, great childhood, but that was a major big, rock in the pond that kind of created some issues.
And it also then created some of your skills and passions in healing, right? Because I always notice this is that the people who are the most aware, awake, and, full of observation, but also the best healers and bringers of light, or however you want to describe that, back to others, are the people who went through the darkness and the cave and they had to break and put themselves back together. And they're like, hey, if I can do this for me, I could probably help other people do it too.
Yes. And the thing too is, I think because you're forced to deal with so much, you can either let it kill you, basically, and die a slow death, to be honest, through alcohol and all that stuff and all that compensation that you try and do.
Or through just not living life, right? Just like shutting down and just, all right.
That's compensation. That's compensation. That's like, let's just close the doors and let me live in my cave and be done with it and hope, that life will be over. The thing is, when you finally go, this sucks enough, this is horrible enough. And then there's part of you though that says there's gotta be a better way, because people are laughing and smiling out there and they're having an okay time. Why am I not feeling this way? Why is that not so natural? And so then you start to look for the pieces to, put yourself together.
Yeah, for me it was, why do I just keep dating guys who treat me like crap, even though I know I don't want to date guys that treat me like crap? Like, why can't I stop dating guys who treat me like crap? And that led to a whole lifetime of transformations. It's like that, like you were saying, your parents didn't, show you, didn't have any modeling of this behavior, and we definitely don't teach it in school. And so healing and dealing with anything really, especially emotional, mental, it's just not something that we understand or know how to do. And so it's awesome that you found it. How did you find healing then? How did you come to all of this?
Well, I was having my own boy troubles, and I was doing exactly what you're doing, dating just the perfectly wrong guys. And I was lamenting about it to a friend of mine, who is still a really close friend of mine. And we were talking, and so he started asking me these questions, and I'd been going to therapy for about a year, and which was kind of helpful, but I was kind of spinning my wheels and being really frustrated that I'm like, I'm not getting any more traction at all. Moderately better, but just no traction. And so he starts asking these questions where, like, I've never heard anybody ask these questions to me before. And after a little bit, I go, what are you doing? And he goes, what? All feigning like he didn't know what he was doing. And I said, no, what you are doing has gotten me deeper into what is happening and how, basically, I'm paraphrasing, but how I was creating my experience. In 15 minutes, I got farther in 15 minutes than I did in a year of therapy.
Wow.
I'm not kidding. And I looked at him, I'm like, what are you doing? And I go, what is this golden, conversation we are having? And so he's like, well, it's called NLP. And I go, all right, where do I go? Like, this is so far beyond. And so I signed up like 3 days later, and 3 years later, 2.5 years later, I'm a master practitioner and so forth, where it's a school where I also learned family soul constellations, and concurrently through another teacher outside of that, I learned Huna. But that's where it started, was these questions are good. They're not about the story. How do you feel about that? Can you journal about it? I'm not saying those are not useful at all. But the crux of NLP is really about, how are you creating your experience? Because what you believe about yourself in the world colors everything. And so if you don't know what you're saying about yourself and believing about yourself and what you're projecting, and you're not in control of it and you're not conscious of it, then you're wreaking havoc. And then you're looking in the mirror going, why am I not in a better place? Why am I not here? You know, why do I not have the red Ferrari? Or why do I not have the promotion? Or why don't I have, I don't know, that blue sweater that I always wanted in the window, but always felt guilty about buying? It doesn't have to be the huge things, but it's those little things that, you know, why do I feel guilty feeling happy? Any of those things that keep you stuck, these questions will just uncover how you're creating your map and that structure that holds everything in place.
That's awesome to hear about. Yeah, I've understood NLP in other ways, but I've never heard about it in relation to healing actually. So this is very exciting for me too. And so, but I guess I want to ask you before maybe we get deeper into what that actually is and what Huna is and what family soul constellations are, is just what types of things that you help people get through. You know, we both, you and I have experienced, suffered, and then healed from trauma. What are the types of things that other people could heal from with you?
Goodness, it is a wide range because the three modalities that I use are complementary and they address different aspects of where the pain is stuck. So if it's in your mental, and ultimately you have to kind of go through all the layers, but we look at the physical layers, right? The mental layers. So let's start with physical. If you're having chronic pains, if you are not sleeping well, if you are tense or always breaking your leg, you know, if you're having physical things that are just chronic and you just go, or tripping. If I am tripping all the time and I have no idea why, like my body works, my doctor says everything's operating fine, but I keep tripping, you know, so we look at the physical, and then we look at the emotional layers that are stuck. Then we look at the mental layers and then the spiritual layers. And so through these modalities, we kind of pick and choose and start somewhere and kind of move into other areas that are useful to help clear what is blocked, whatever it is.
And it's sometimes very different than what people think. I have this story that I tell that because it's just a good example of my right shin bone, right? I kept hitting it and hitting it and hitting it. I'd hit it really, really hard and it'd be so bad. It'd slowly heal and slowly heal. It'd finally be like nearly healed. And I hit it in the exact same spot again. And I was like, what are the chances that suddenly in my life I'm just doing this over and over again? Like, what could it possibly be? And I was just sitting, sort of asking, you know, my inner self or whatever to help me figure out what this is. And I had this memory of this time where I went up to this kid and I was a horrible bully. And I grabbed his cigarettes and I said, give me a cigarette. And he said no. And I kicked him in the shin as hard as I could and took his cigarettes. I was like, oh, it's literally karma. I'm so sorry, soul of that kid. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. And I normally was a bully of bullies, but this was the one time where I hurt just a person for no reason. Like they hadn't done anything wrong. They weren't attacking someone else. I wasn't protecting anyone. I was just harming. Right. So totally different story. And definitely learned my lesson, and that's the type of thing that's much more energetic, right? You know,
definitely. And to your point, there was until I was late college, I had weak ankles all the time, and I would twist my ankle, I would sprain my ankle, probably yearly, and so forth and so on. And as I started to do the work and learn how the body really reflects what we believe about ourselves, you know, all these old energies that are not resolved, karma, if you will. And so I realized that, well, if I didn't have strong ankles, it was because I wasn't able to stand up for myself.
I love that.
And so I
don't love that you didn't, but I love the correlation.
No, I know, it was horrible. I'm like, why? And I'm going, you know, I'm doing the calf raises and everything else. I'm trying to strengthen my ankles, but I keep twisting my ankle. And so over time, as I was doing NLP and taking the classes, I haven't twisted my ankle in years. And it was just fascinating that I was somehow able to release that energy. And so now I can stand on my own 2 feet, and I haven't, you know, enough of my foundation, you know, to draw upon, and so forth. So that's, you know, another example of where you just go, I'm just being silly, you know, all right, I'm just twisting my ankle, and how does this happen to me, right? We're the victims of circumstance. I have since learned that I am never a victim of circumstance, that somehow I am just in that place at the right time to have this experience, whether it's a lesson, a vibrational thing where, you know, if I'm vibrating on a certain level with belief systems and so forth, then that sort of stuff just kind of comes to you. And once you level up or shift and acknowledge and let go, then you won't necessarily need to twist your ankles anymore, right?
Right.
So it's fascinating. So it's all like personal responsibility stuff, which sometimes sucks. And you look at the mirror and you're like, I don't want to be big and awesome today, you know? And but sometimes you're like, let's rock it. Let's just do it.
Yeah. How cool. I love that that cleared up for you and that you were able to grab that new mindset. And like you said, though, not everybody does. Not everybody was ready to or really wants to or was, I think, is really willing to admit that, like, oh, yeah, it really is me. Like, I'm doing this, especially if it's something that feels very much not our fault or like it's coming from outside of us or we really were victimized somehow, and that's true too. But why else do
Yes.
people resist this type of thing? Like, why wouldn't you want to be happier and healthier? And you know what I mean? Like, I've moved, I think, well, this is the year of my life where I've moved less times than years I've been alive, finally. So I had moved more times than years I'd been alive most of my life. And I love change. Like, it makes me excited. I'm like, cool, let's go, let's move, let's get in the van, let's drive around, like, let's change jobs, let's do a million things. Nobody else is like that, though. I'm like the weirdo, right? Why do people hate this so much?
Oh, goodness. Well, if we're going to talk about one who enjoys or somehow keeps changing a lot, having to move all the time and so forth. And I know someone like that. And I think there are two things that might be happening. One is if there was a lot of change happening growing up, what you survive, you recreate because that was the energy that happened. And if you survived it and you got to the next, you know, place and you're just like, okay, I'm okay, then you tend to repeat the patterns because it worked. Our brains operate on a reward system. So if something worked, it might not have been the best choice or whatever, but whatever is the best choice at the time, then we file it away. And then, like a deck of cards, we go, oh, this is a similar situation. I'm going to just draw out that card and we're going to play it again because I know how to do it. Right? Why keep learning a million different skills and tactics if we only need to, you know, learn maybe 100? Just keep reusing what works. So if someone is growing up with lots of change, you tend to repeat it. But sometimes you go, I'm kind of tired of doing that. And I used to be a person of change as well. And so I would move about every year, and it was always in the summer or fall. And but then what I did was I consciously thought of, do I need to move my whole world where you really have to have new patterns of grocery stores and all these things? I go, that's a lot. Could I make great change where I actually live? And I go, oh, well, there's this, and I love gardening. So I go, well, why don't I make the change in my garden and so forth, and look at that, which is constant. So part of so I consciously told my little brain to go, all right, well, let's make that change. So rather than filtering for new houses and new towns, let's filter for gardening and seasonal and constant that. And so my brain is now happy focusing on that rather than having to make great change. So that was something that I worked on. So anyway, so what you survive, you recreate. And also there are, I don't know if it's necessarily a different category or related to what you survive, you recreate. There are 4 categories of kind of timelines of people. And there's one where it's, 0 to 2 years, where it's the differences person, which I think probably you and I are like that. And you'll notice in their languaging, they'll use words that are more differences, different, change. They'll use more words like that rather than the next category, which is more similarities with differences, where they compare things. This thing is more or less than this, this other thing. The languaging is different. And so that's like 2 to 5 year differences. They'll make a major change between 2 and 5. And then there's one where it's, I think, 5 and 10. And then there's one where it's 12 to 25. And one of my older brothers is a similarities. Doesn't need change. He could probably have the same 3 meals a week, no problem, doesn't need to do, new clothes. He can have the same car for 50 years. Like those things don't bother him. He doesn't need that adrenaline rush, to experience. And so his language has more comparative language. So that's how you can actually tell a little bit more about what kind of type you are.
Interesting.
Which is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And which type of those four timeline related sort of people, when it comes to change, which type is most likely, or is there a type that's more likely to choose healing? Because healing is transformational and transformation requires change. So is it the changers that team to, or is it kind of even despite that?
I would imagine it's probably equal, because the languaging, again, you're saying change, people change. But sometimes people might say, well, you can shift from anger to more of love. You can shift from sadness and fear to, so forth and so on. So I think I would imagine it would be the middle category or differences, because they are operating on kind of the horizon, always looking for the newness, what's different, what's better, what's more of. But if you have complete similarities and you're cool with just, mowing your grass every day and, having the same bills all the time and not traveling, and you're totally happy, very pleasantly happy where you are, my guess is probably less for those people, but more of the middle categories, comparative languaging and differences. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And for me, change is genuinely fun, and it's always been it doesn't feel chaotic, and just for other people it really does. And I always just feel bad for them, because I'm like, I've had only opportunities arise for me because I get to run around, but I think they look at me and feel bad because they're like, oh, your life is chaos and how stressful. I'm like, this is not stressful, this is just fun.
Yeah.
I get to travel and do new things, and I really think it's a Sagittarius in me, because my siblings are not the same at all, and they grew up in the exact same amount of chaos as me, so I really think that's just my soul makeup that loves that and thrives in newness. But helping people to kind of embrace that transformative change, whether that's their habit or just something new and completely crazy to them, is something I think we both do in different ways. And obviously you've done this so much, and you've helped people in their soul, their heart, their mind, their body. Like we were talking about the layers earlier, and how each of those has to have some aspect of the healing that's going to take place, or else it's just not going to happen, right? But what are some of your favorite transformations and changes that you've seen people go through?
Oh, everyone is my favorite, because I see.
You're like the mom that got asked the question, which kid is the favorite? I love them all.
Seriously, I know, and it's like you love them for different reasons. They teach you different things. You are thrust into new avenues, new experiences. Every person has a different experience. I think the most recent favorite, and it was really challenging for me, because I hadn't experienced this with a client before, but this teenager was adopted from a foreign country, and happily, but this child was really offline, meaning not interested in life, not interested in school, not interested in friends, really distracted, and so forth. And I had 3 sessions with her in using all of the tools that I had. And it was interesting, because she ended up hearing voices. And I go, okay, are the voices internal dialogue? Which, we always have kind of internal things. But is it just like one person, or is it her parents, really, like things that we install ourselves that, oh, well, if my mom was to talk to me, this is what she would say, or my dad, by concurrently. And so, but the way she was talking, I go, this doesn't sound like anything I've experienced before. And so I said, all right, well, how old are they? I was asking descriptions, and they were not her. Like they were not her, but they weren't entities either. and meaning spirits from, or beings from either people who haven't passed over happily and are still earthbound, or entities and ghosts from anywhere, right? And so that can be a subject later we can get into. But anyway, they weren't like, the conversation was not anything familiar to me. And so I ended up learning, I asked a colleague to help me out with this, and she had said that this girl was so empathic that she was connected to other people that she'd met throughout her life and was hearing their voices. And so she was deferring to them to kind of make decisions for her because she did not feel whole herself. So there was a lot of work about all of that. And what was so cool was, and the other thing too was, she stuttered quite a bit. And so I'm like, I wonder if an entity is stuttering or if that's her with lack of confidence. But throughout the 3 sessions, she barely stuttered at all at the very end.
Wow.
She was getting better grades. She had a job. Like, she had all these wonderful things coming into her life. And like, she was smiling and she was having a better relationship with her mother. And it was just like, wow.
That's so cool.
In 3 sessions, like, all these things happen. And to see her smile and be more engaged, and her voice shifted and she was more present. And I'm like, this is why I do my work. This is why I love it. I'm just so humbled by it because it's just awesome. It's like, you don't have to have the 10 years of therapy to have one amazing aha moment. It's just, no, we're doing a crap load of work right here. And you don't have to wait. You don't have to, wait in line for 10 years. And it's like, it's gets me so excited every day when I have these, and every experience is maybe not quite that level, but that was really my favorite this year. Was just awesome.
So direct and nearly palpable and just beautiful. So I can totally imagine. And it is very gratifying. But I like how you said too, it's very humbling, that this is the sort of power of this. And that's so cool to hear. I always say to people, and they're like, should I go to counseling? I'm like, I think you should go to therapy, not counseling. And they're like, what's the difference? And I'm like, well, you could spend maybe 30 years in counseling and finally get where you would have gotten in like a month of therapy. So therapy is just better in my opinion. And sounds like NLP and what you're doing is to therapy as to counseling, but maybe even on crack, like just hypercharged, like thrown off the
That
cliff.
word came into my head. I'm like, can I use that word? Yeah, it's like it's on crack because you just get through all these layers. And here's the thing is, a lot of therapies that I'm familiar with, not all, I think they're all great for, like, the therapy will find the person, and the person will find the therapy, right? So I'm not judging, but it's like, for those who really want to go, let's just break this open because I'm really tired of having this experience forever and ever and ever. And now I'm divorced, and now I've lost my job, or now I'm just waking up stressed and frustrated all the time. Like, why do you want to do that anymore? So let's dive in with rapport and safety and security and go, where do you want to go? And here's the other thing I want to address when we are talking about why perhaps those who've been in the dark cave and literally clawed their way out. I love how you say that, because I'm like, yeah, you get it. You claw, you have to fight through all your belief systems and stuff because no one else is going to do it. And you have to face like, well, this keeps not working. So you have to shift. What I want to say is that because we've done the work to whatever level that is, we can have the rapport and the acknowledgement and better sympathy, and we can bring them across that finish line, at least to that point, I think much more successfully than someone who's read a book about it.
Oh yeah, I'm totally with you there.
Right?
Yeah, people will come into a session with me and they're like, oh, I was really nervous, but you made it really easy. I'm like, thank you. Because I hope so. Yeah. Because how awful would it be to be like, all right, I'm ready to heal, and then get in and be like, oh, I'm so uncomfortable for how many sessions. And like, when you were talking about that, how quickly this transformation can come with the work that you're doing with people, it made me think sometimes people choose to change and choose to heal, and you want to grab them right then, because they could start with therapy or something slower and then get a few times in and be like, no, actually I'm comfortable back in my hole. I'm gonna fall back down. So if you can get them that quick, like, wow, you must have seen a lot of really cool transformation.
Yes, and it's been really neat to have that experience with people and then go, look, I don't want to see you for years. I want you to go live your life and be happy. If you need a tune-up, I'm always here. That's fantastic. But I don't want you to spend tons of money on me. Yes, I mean, it's like so each session is up to 2 hours, about every 3 weeks or so, so there's integration and everything else. But, depending on, of course, the levels that you're wanting to get to, I think minimal 3 sessions is really important, because just dipping your toe in the water is really not going to get you anywhere. It's a little bit more of a mental research opportunity rather than going, let's really do this. But 3 is a really good place to get started. And then you're also noticing a huge shift. Like, for example, one of the other things on top of anxieties and chronic pains and so forth, and is anxiety and phobias, right? If you can't sleep, or you're stressed, or you have PTSD, the episodes and the nightmares that keep coming up. I had that. What happened for me was I had forgotten about my experience until I was 16. I was reading a romance novel and getting into that whole fun genre. And literally there was one, the storyline was similar enough to mine. Not exactly. So it wasn't like I was just absorbing it and creating some, non-existent experience. But it caused me to have nightmares, to replay it and really understand it. And I was crying all the time, and it was playing over and over and over, and I could not stop it. I didn't know what to do. And so I mean, that's PTSD. It's trying to, and that's the brain trying to find the eject button. It's like, and trying to get out of that cycle. But the replaying is almost also keeping you safe, because that's tied with your identity at that moment. And so there's a lot of entangling that needs to happen for you to then, the PTSD can relax and calm down a bit. So then the other parts, the higher self, can start to speak, that you can trust yourself a little bit more, and you can integrate more with your present and future self, rather than staying stuck completely in the past. Because what PTSD is, you are stuck in the past, like a little hamster in a hamster wheel. And it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. But that is another thing I do help, is PTSD issues.
Which is great, because there's very few modalities that can help with PTSD, and so it's really awesome. And I was very lucky to find EMDR and find some healing through that, which I think most people listening would be familiar with, because they've probably heard me talk about it. But just for anyone who's not, it's just eye movement desensitization, something. And it's one of the modalities that helps people with PTSD recalibrate and reintegrate those times when they were experiencing trauma. But it's so weird sometimes, the triggers too, and like one of my triggers was knocking. Just knocking on the door. And as much as I've tried to remember anything that might have anything to do with knocking, there's none. There was someone at my door at one of my traumas, and they were trying to get in, but they definitely weren't knocking. But I'm like, I guess that's similar enough. Someone knocking is trying to get in. And I'm like, so I would someone would knock, and I would run into my room and just start shaking and crying. And I'm like, it's just a person at the door. Like, what's wrong with me? But you can't do anything but that, like you said. And it's weird. PTSD is really weird, because I would have thought I was such a strong person. Nothing can really scare me. And knocking on the door can scare me. So triggers are bizarre, phobias are bizarre, and they're all wrapped up in this. And if you can help people address those and heal those, I mean, that's an amazing service to provide people. And so is this mostly through, like you said, you do NLP and HUNA and other things? Is there one that sort of you rely on more? Is it this all 3 every session, or how does it go?
I don't rely on one necessarily more than the other, because what I do with every client is I do an entity clearing first. Because if you don't do that, then all the entity's emotions and thoughts and everything will kick out all the learning and shift that you're trying to do, because they're happy with the status quo.
They want to keep
right?
feeding. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, so I always do an entity clearing, which deals with soul fragments and hexes and all sorts of things. So it's not just okay, boom, you're entity free and so forth. But it takes me about an hour to go through the list, and then I write down everything that's happening, and I do that just remotely, and then I give a report. So I do that with every client, and then I just tend to start off with NLP, and then I see where that goes, and that's really my starting point. If it's a phobia, most often that's childhood related, or how would I say it? Kind of like an absorbed experience from someone else. Maybe it was your parent who actually had the phobia. And when we're little, we don't like to make our parents wrong because they're our caregivers. They give us life, they give us sustenance, they give us clothes, security in general, depending. But overall, like that's our world. And if they don't like us, and if they're mad at us and anything negative, then we're going to have a brutal life. And then, we're going to try and do whatever we can to make the caregivers happy. So if they have an opinion, if they have a judgment, if they have a fear or a trigger, then we'll go, oh, well, and the thing is they don't just teach us math and how to hold our forks. They teach us through their actions and their belief systems. And so we're learning unconsciously what their experiences are. So sometimes we absorb that and make that our own. Anyway, so I start off with NLP, and then I go often into family soul constellations, because now what that is it's just so cool. Like I love NLP. Everything I do is so phenomenal. But family soul constellations is one of these modalities that everyone has to have one. Everyone just has to have one, because what happens is, in the past of generations back, maybe it's 3 or 4, tends to be max 3 or 4, whatever is stuck, unresolved, pushed under the carpet, not addressed, anything like that, from wars to loss of fortune to miscarriages to emigration, alcoholism, any sort of thing where you see patterns or anything. The younger generations will unconsciously grab onto that in effort to say, I love you, and point to the problem and say, there's a problem that we need to fix. But what happens is all we're doing is grabbing onto that pattern and plastering it all over our life. Doesn't save them, who long since often passed away, and it doesn't save us. So family constellations is basically a way of looking into what that stuck energy is through kind of a double blind setup. And I'll get into that in a bit, but we see what's stuck, how it's stuck, and then we offer a resolution. And when we offer that resolution, what's so amazing is it creates a ripple effect through space and time in real time. And then the energy shifts. And so if you're having, sometimes our relationship issues are not necessarily what we learned as a child, it's family stuff, and so there's all these entangled webs of mental, personal stuff. And then we get into the family stuff. And then Huna gets into the entity stuff. So you really need all three, I think, to really make an impact. Otherwise, one's going to kick out the other, or it just won't be complete enough to really install properly and rebuild that foundation that you need.
It's so interesting, because you're absolutely right about that triple approach and those areas, right? Your own self, your ancestral self, and the spiritual side, especially with entities and stuff. And it's interesting that you and I have completely different traditions and backgrounds, that we have almost the exact same process in what we actually do with people. And that's amazing to me. But these are the type of things that I love. And I think it gives them so much more power, that people can see that, like, there's so many ways of doing this. And if there's so many ways of doing it and they're all effective, there's a reason why we should all be doing this stuff. Not that everyone needs to be the healer themselves. You should if you're called, but that everyone needs to be doing that work, that level of self-healing and ancestral clearing. And spiritual clearing. And I just love that is so well aligned. Um, and the phobia thing I wanted to mention too, my own personal phobia that I still deal with, even though, the rest of my PTSD is very well healed, I want to say. I know a lot of people wouldn't accept that that's possible, but I think it is. But this one phobia I still have, and that for me is attached to a past life that I had spontaneous recall of. And so what do you think about that carryover as well?
It's absolutely possible to have. I've had that myself, and I'm trying to remember what that was. Oh, well, it wasn't necessarily a phobia, but it was one of the reasons I couldn't date was because I was already married. And the person who was attached to me was my spouse from a past life.
Oh.
So I did a past life regression with this woman who fortunately is no longer working, but she did a lot of crystal healing and so forth. And she was very psychic. And so she could see the stories. I mean, I've been trained to do that as well, but it was unbelievable. And it's like the story came out and I just look at her, I'm just like, start crying. I'm going, oh my God. And so it was like, well, do you want to clear, this person? I'd go, not yet. I just found this person. Yeah. But 3 or 4 days later, he goes, I love you, but I'm kind of ready to move on now. And I go, oh, and it took me a while to go, all right, well, we're still connected. I still love you. And if you're ready to move on, then, I've got to live this life. This is where I am. So let's be in the present. And so then I felt him leave. Aww. And then over the next month or so, I just kind of became more whole. And sure enough, I found my now husband. Wow. And it was great, but that's what was stopping me. And so things from past lives definitely can carry over. And there's, a belief even, and I don't know if I believe it, but I think it's possible of birthmarks actually being, ways or pains that we've experienced in past lives. That's like that old stuck energy. Yeah. I've read lots of stories about how people have a birthmark and they'll do a regression, and it was some major battle wound or some major way that they died, and you just go, that's pretty uncanny. So my mind is open for that, definitely.
Yeah, how fascinating. Yeah. And I know there can be the tendency for people out there who haven't considered all of these things to be a little bit overwhelmed and be like, whoa, okay, I was just thinking about like my physical health, and now I have to wonder if it's karma or past lives or my like ancestral, things following me along, or entities, or all this stuff. But that's actually, the beautiful thing is looking around and realizing like, oh, it's actually simple, not easy to heal all of this once you know that it could be any of these things, and once you choose the right modalities, or in your case or my case, work with the right person who attacks all those fronts at once, then you're really hypercharged in your healing.
Exactly. And if I could just jump in on that, because I remember being overwhelmed with, as I was learning this on like past lives and timelines, and sometimes my friends who I'm learning all the time, sometimes I'm like, okay, just stop. My brain is going to just explode right now. Yeah. I am done. Just like, let me just sit with this for a while. And it was like about multiple dimensions and timelines and everything else. And anyway, I couldn't handle it. But here's the deal. Here's like, if we're going to draw it down to one simple phrase, it is, I help people, and you do as well, help people bring up into consciousness, into conscious awareness, wherever it's stuck. Yeah. I just have a really big flashlight.
Yeah, it's like a spotlight.
It's a spotlight, and I know where to look that's greater than just the current mental, how do you feel about that? Let's go back to the childhood and so forth. Yeah. Like this really gets into belief systems, old experiences, whatever you're holding on to that you're not really aware of. And let's bring that to the surface, address it, acknowledge it, thank it, forgive it. And this is part of what Huna does. And there's a phrase that I would love to share with everyone. It's called Ho'oponopono. Oh, yeah. It means to make it right. There are two different sayings, if you will, but the simpler one is, I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, and I thank you. And that energy tends to clear 7 generations up and 7 generations below. And so whenever I get stuck, or I don't know what needs to be said or healed. I just start with that and see how that feels. It's a really good starting point for people to just kind of be present with it and kind of just clear the decks, if you will.
Absolutely. That is very good practice. That specific one, or really any forgiveness practice where you are acknowledging the love and the true connection between every soul, even if they've made really poor choices sometimes. So what is Huna? We never even answered that question, so I know we're cycling a bit, but what is it?
So Huna is Hawaiian spiritual based healing, and it is taught by certain kahuna in Hawaii. So I am a kahuna.
Huh.
Yep. And it's kahuna means a seer of that which is unseen.
Like a shaman.
And so that's where my psychic abilities come up. I have always been psychic ever since I was little. I would have premonitions, meaning I would have dreams 6 months in advance of something happening. And it came so often in high school, actually, where I could literally follow the conversation and say word to word in time with this guy standing across from me. And so my reality got very skewed. I was like,
strange.
Am I in a dream right now? That was very, very hard. And I didn't have anyone to answer those questions at that time. I mean, who do you call in then the yellow pages of all of this? But anyway, so Huna is a way of healing where there's an understanding that there is a co-creative process in our experience, right? So NLP and Family Soul Constellations also addresses that of what you believe you create, what you believe you experience, and what you experience you believe. So in healing for Huna, the kahuna will ask questions like if you broke your leg, for example, they would say, well, how did you break your leg? Right? Not what happened to you, right? Because that's a passive stance. That's a passive question. How you phrase questions is really important.
Yeah.
Just like in NLP, and it's ask questions that drill down to the root cause of the problem, not what you think about it, what the story is and what everyone was wearing and how you felt about it. It's how did you somehow create that experience for yourself that you had that experience. Sometimes, and I'll do this for myself now, if I start to get sick, I'll go, why am I getting sick? Why do I need to get sick? Am I exhausted? Am I doing too many things? Do I feel that I'm not getting enough love and attention? Do I really need to get sick to have that experience? Or can I just ask for a hug, right? So I address what my real needs are such that maybe I don't need to go through that process. And I will tell you, I have healed myself overnight, where I will feel a cold coming on and I'm overdoing it. I'm exhausted or frustrated, whatever life is, handing me. And I have done it such that in that night cycle, I will be half asleep, but I will be healing myself and just consciously shifting what my needs are and going, well, do I need to actually get sick? Or can I take a day off? Can I don't know, do whatever self-care I need? Do I need that hug or whatever that is? And not what I think I should need, but what do I really need? And then give that to yourself. So it's a way of really addressing how do you heal and what's really at the root cause of it. Is it a past life thing? Is it a childhood thing? Is it an entity thing? We don't know. And that's the main realm that Huna handles.
That's so cool.
Is all that ghostly cool stuff.
Yeah, and just getting, again, directly to the point and directly to the source. And thank God, I'm just so grateful that there are things that are quicker, because it's just, and I feel like the further time moves forward, the more we need things that are quicker. So that's very cool. And can you explain more then about soul family constellations? Is that like soul groups or that we've kind of heard about, or is it totally different?
I honestly don't know much about soul groups other than, you're talking about souls that travel together.
Well, people, have the idea that in general, like your parents and you and your siblings have probably been together for multiple lifetimes, maybe in different arrangements, but I'm not sure if that's what this is.
It doesn't address that specifically at
Oh,
all, though I believe, and I've experienced that to happen as well.
yeah.
And so I think that's absolutely, I think that's a real thing. But family soul constellations is the framework of, again, addressing what has not been acknowledged and healed in the past from past generations, from
Oh, you've already said that.
grandparents,
Yeah.
great uncles, and all of that. So if you know, for example, if you have alcoholism in the family, and this is a theory of mine, is if you say have alcoholism 3 generations back, and then 2 generations back, and then you have someone maybe with liver cancer in the 3rd generation, to me, I question whether it's now the body, the stuck energy has turned it into physical form.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's not, it doesn't need to do alcoholism because the body and the energy and has translated that into, well, then I guess I need to have cancer.
Yeah.
And right. And so, but if you heal that stuck energy, will that person will that person heal from cancer? My guess is yes, or it will stop the cancer from growing, perhaps. This is conjecture, but I've had enough experience in family soul constellations where I've worked with people who have been very, very sick.
Yeah.
For example, there was someone who was in the hospital, had meningitis, pneumonia, sepsis. She was alcoholic. There was a whole host of things going on. She was doing a really good job, basically trying to kill herself slowly. Okay. But there was this one point where, again, it's like addressing personal responsibility. Why is she creating this experience for herself? And I stepped into pneumonia, and it was fascinating. I just thought, well, a virus or pneumonia, if it's a virus, I forget, but whatever it is, I stepped into the experience of pneumonia, and it was basically just code. And it goes, I don't care what I'm doing. I have no need to do anything, but this is just what I do. So if the conditions are present in the body, then I will happen this way. And I go, well, that's interesting. And so it's just basically operating by instruction from the master creator of the person, right? Who the soul in the body running the ship. And I go, whoa, it made me think of illness so differently after that constellation. I go, it was like a mind blown thing. So it's like, rather than trying to kill cancer, trying to kill whatever it is, address the root stuff before it gets there. Or if it's there, address all that other stuff such that it doesn't need to operate. And then your body will then naturally want to eat foods differently such that that doesn't need to occur. These things are only present when the conditions are there.
Yeah.
The conditions are there because you have feelings and stuck things. And then thus you make choices, right? So it's the feelings and the stuck energy, then the choices, and then the repercussions from that. So anyway, that's kind of how I feel about illness, that it is a consequence or a result of other things. And I think often the medical field fights the symptoms, but doesn't really address the root cause.
Yeah.
And so that's, yeah. So it does, I mean, I'm not knocking medical science whatsoever. It's phenomenal. But I go, but can we one up that such that maybe we don't need to address, I mean, basically you're dealing with critical care when a person is in critical condition. Let's go before that. But very rarely do we do that, right? If everything's kind of good enough, then why go to the doctor? Why not eat that extra pint of ice cream? And it's not so bad. It's okay until it's not okay anymore. Anyway, so family soul constellations is a beautiful framework to address the root causes and old energies, and you can apply it to work. You don't even need to have it just family, but what is the stuck energy? And let's step into all the roles and see what's really going on and how all those roles are relating to each other. So here's the framework: is the client and the practitioner, or they say facilitator, has a conversation about family history, or whatever the history is that we're wanting to look into. What's stuck in your life? What sucks? What do you want to make better? And then we kind of write on little, post-it notes or cards of different roles, maybe family members, maybe we even do entities, maybe we do the light, maybe we do government. I mean, it could be a whole host of things, or our boss. And so what we do is we fold them up, and then the people who are representatives who will be stepping on these cards or holding their cards in the back pocket have no idea of the history of the client. They have no information whatsoever and about the situation or anything. And they will just be given a card and led by the client to a particular part in the room, whatever feels appropriate. And this is where you turn your higher brain functioning off and you just follow your intuition. And it's always right. It's always right. Every single constellation is absolutely correct. And some people might want to lay on the floor. Some people might want to do a certain action. They might want to turn and face away. They might scowl at someone. I mean, all these things are being downloaded into the person, and we uncover what the energies are, and maybe there are phrases that need to be said. And then we look at that, and then we go, well, what needs to happen that's more appropriate? What healing needs to happen? And then when we address that there and offer the resolution there, then people will start to move. They'll just naturally want to move. And then they will end up being in the proper place. And so based on the patterns that we've learned over time from thousands and thousands of these, you end up knowing what the appropriate stances are and so forth. And it's just fascinating, the healing that happens pretty darn immediately. I always say it's better than TV. It's like the things you uncover and you learn about history, the things that people uncover. They see pictures sometimes and they explain it and you just go, oh my God, I never knew that could happen in a war. They go, yep, it happened. And this is what it looks like, and so forth and so on. It's fascinating. It's fascinating.
I have no doubt that it's right every time, like you said, because I do, tarot is one of the modalities I use, and I've never, ever, every single time I'm like, I don't know, is it going to be this time? And every single time I'm like, of course it was. Of course it nailed it. It does every time. Like
every time.
When you're in that mode, I think, where you're open, you're choosing healing and change and transformation, and you're there for that, and you're directing it, your consciousness is right, your soul has shown up, all of your allies have shown up, and it's gonna come through for you. And earlier I wanted to touch back on, you're talking about like when these things are happening to you and you're going through all of this, you're searching, you're maybe down in that deep cave we were describing. And, and you were saying, especially back then when we were coming up, like, who do you call? And I think a lot of people relate to that feeling of having experiences like this or wanting to have healings like this and not seeing that around them and not seeing anywhere. And so I'm just very grateful that this exists more and more and that it is more and more available to people. And have you noticed that in the past year and a half, more and more people have been seeking your support because of, how much trauma is going on a worldwide level? Because I've definitely seen that.
Yes, I have. And I think, well, this year, we'll get into that. I mean, it's the thing that, it's frustrating, but on one level. So on the mini me side, the small personal level, I'm angry and frustrated that things are playing out or were playing out as they were, because I think there was a lot of lack of truth. There was a lot of hidden agendas and so forth. And I'm really about the truth and the no BS with that. And I will get really in your face about that if you're not about the truth, because I will feel the difference. And it took me a long time to go. When someone, especially like my little kids, they'll do the tiniest pause, they'll look in one little direction, I'm like, yep, you're lying.
Yeah.
But when you feel the difference, the energy is different with someone. They turn gray. It's like they dim. All these things that I notice, I just, okay, not the truth. The thing that is good about this past year and a half is that it had to get so bad. The truth to be hidden for long enough where people go, wait a minute. Now, not everyone is there yet, and that's fine. That's their path and whatever. But for those who are just going, I'm just going to search a little bit more and think for myself and research enough And the thing is, there's a big waking up, I think, that's happening, where the people who can't handle the truth, well, then they'll go away as they need to, or they will stay on that plane and they'll operate until it doesn't work for them anymore. Okay. And then there's no judgment. It's like, well, if you want to operate there, you will stay there until it doesn't work.
True.
And then you'll need to shift or not. It's always a choice. But for those who are going, I need to level up here, or I am done with this level because, I'm just tired of it. Those are the searchers. Those are there has got to be something better. It's that question. And it's that inward guidance, that knowing that everyone has of there's got to be something. I don't know what it is. I don't know where it's going to show up. It might be the tiniest conversation with some random stranger on a corner. I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
And they could say one nice thing to you that just has you sobbing because you're like, wow, that person was kind. Maybe kindness does exist, right? That one thing that you needed to catapult you into that upper echelon where you go, all right, that was just the boost I needed to now make it to that next step. Don't think about the huge mountain you have to climb. Think about that one step in front of the other and trust that it will lead you to something good, to something better that you need to have in your life. And when you trust that, then it will come into your life. And it's always there. It's always waiting. Universe is always just waiting to go, what do you want? What do you want from me? And if you ask for it, I will not like pleading, but I ask for it because I genuinely in my soul want it and need it. And that's my goal. Then it will show up. But you just have to open your eyes a little bit and shift your filters. Just be open for that opportunity. And then it will show up and you'll go, coincidence?
I think not.
Exactly.
I love that reminder. It's so true. And it really is. I feel like the universe is like, what do you see? And you're like, oh, this. And it's like, yep, that's what you see. And so that mindset we're in where we're like, I'm angry and I'm sad and I'm like, whatever. The universe is like, yeah, you are. And then you get to that level, like you said, where you're like, okay, well, now I'm this. And the universe is like, okay, here's that instead. And it's just such a beautiful thing. And I feel like, what you're, you and other healers and myself are really offering is this unvictimization, right? Like no longer are you just like at the whim of some forces you can't control. Now you're the powerful one. Now you're the one who's going to get things done and create what you want. Like step into that. It's kind of terrifying for people though.
Yes. When you have had the identity, look, I've been through it. I would imagine it sounds like you have as well. There's this, this dynamic that happens where you're just like, oh my God, if I have power, if I'm responsible in some sort of way, well, then that means I have a little control over my life. That can scare people.
They're like, I'm not doing this anymore.
I just like, oh my God. And that's scary because the thing is, there's a certain sort of power with being a victim. There's an identity. There's a reward that you get for being a victim. I played that card because that was the only way I knew to get it because the other doors weren't open yet. But then I just go, I'm kind of tired of hearing my own crap. I'm really tired of it. And I wore myself out. And some people need to do that. And I go, well, what else is there? Because it's just like, everyone else is just kind of moving along. And I'm like, I'm just, wow. And I finally was able to look outside and I wore myself out. And then I go, what else is there? And it was like, and it's just that simple question, which I love. It's like, well, what else? What else could there be? But so people get tied with their identity, with being a victim. And so it's scary to move on, but, and have power. So it's the good news, bad news. Good news is you have power. Good news is you have control and you can direct yourself. Bad news is it's like, well, shit, that means I have power. That means I have responsibility. But again, you're just doing the next step. Don't look at the mountain far away across the desert. It's like, no, don't go there. That's overwhelming, right? Like, as I said, don't look at the billions of modalities and entities and all these things. Just go, it's one truth. We are getting to the root cause, bringing it to the surface. Similarly, just get to that next step of, can I be responsible for brushing my own teeth? Am I cool with that? Yes. Okay. Now can I step out, can I walk outside the door and drive myself to work or whatever it is? Yes, I can do that. Do the small steps, feel empowered with that. And then maybe you can go, well, maybe I could do a little bit more the next time. And do baby steps, because if you do too much, you're going to just crash and burn. You're going to freak yourself out.
Yes, but the first time you have like results that you never saw before and didn't expect necessarily, then you're going to be hooked and you're going to keep going.
You're going to go, this is kind of cool. It's okay to feel good. This is nice.
Yeah. I remember the
Definitely.
first time people started telling me like, wow, you're like smiling and laughing. And I was like, man, am I? Like, did I not before? Like, life's kind of cool now. I like it.
Yes, life is not as hard as we feel it needs to be. And when it's easier, I remember this one time I had become a master practitioner and we were in this graduation little party. And I looked over at my colleague and I go, do you just feel that this huge weight over the past few years has just lifted from your shoulders, that it's like you're taller? It literally does not feel so heavy here. Like wearing a big platter of bricks. And she goes, absolutely. That is exactly how I feel. It's like, we're smiling more. It's easier and you're having great dialogue with people. And it's like, it's not like the cogs in or like a wrench in the works, right? That we're throwing the wrenches in there. We just don't know it. And then once they're out, you're like, wow, you spray a little WD-40 in there and you're like, this is nice. Right on. This is great. Yes.
So cool.
Much more fun to be on the other side of it. Definitely.
Yeah. And it's maybe even easier than people think. But I know you've had some experiences where with children who are seeming to experience especially entities or other energies. And, we talk a lot about how kids are maybe, is it that they're closer to source? Is it that they just have these skills and these uncalcified pineal glands or whatever it is, though, kids do seem to have this much more clear sight and understanding a lot of times. And what are some of the experiences you've had that have shown that to you?
Let's see. I've worked with two children, one of whom was about, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7. And she and her family had moved into a home in Northern California. And ever since they had moved in for 4 years, she would scream and cry, have a apoplectic fit every time she had to go to bed, every time she had to go into her room. And so I had given my card to someone, and it was kind of in the beginning of me kind of branching out and saying, I'm Kahuna, you're a Kahuna. I do these things that are a little off the wall, but they really do work. And she goes, I actually have a job for you. And, please come to my home. And so I did a session where, again, it was double blind. So I said, please don't tell your daughter, because I really want to know that the work that I do is really being felt and that I'm doing it completely. Because if I'm missing anything, I'll come back. It hasn't happened before, but I'm always open to learning and seeing if there's anything else. So anyway, so I did my work, and I'll get into the details of that in a moment. But what ended up happening was, and I wrote 2 days later, how are things going? She goes, my daughter, we had dinner. She went straight to bed, didn't cry, didn't even think about it. Like it was as if it had never happened.
Wow.
And I'm like, awesome, victory. That was it was so great. And what ended up happening was the woman who had built the house had passed away, and her husband had at another time as well, but he passed over no problem. Very gentle man. I got a full-on download of like what he looked like, what he felt like, and his personality. And she was lovely as well, but she was very passionate about this house. And when she died, she gifted it to her son, and her son didn't want it, so he sold it. And she's like, kind of like, how could you? I built this house, I loved it. And she had done a lot of charity work, and she had all these cats. Anyway, so she was fully ensconced in this house. And so she was still there. And where was her bedroom? Where her daughter's room was, or, the new family's daughter was. And the other thing too that was in this room and that was main issue number one. Secondly, the family had since divorced. The current family that lives there had since divorced maybe a year prior. And the wedding dress was there, and it was in a box on top of the closet. And I kept looking at it and I go, that doesn't really feel right, and I won't necessarily know, but I'm like, let's look into that. And so I said, can you come on over? And I said, what is in that box? And she goes, oh, it's my wedding dress. I go, and you're divorced? And she goes, I see the problem. I go, yes, a lot of conflicting energy here, and so when there's conflicting energy emotionally with the people in the house, just, clear it, like do the Ho'opono phrase that I told you, clear it before giving it to Goodwill or to a friend or whatever, neutralize that energy, bless it, and then let it move on. Very, very important to do with everything. Specifically jewelry, really close items. Okay. Anyway, so the dress was moved. And then also there were all these butterflies, little decals on the wall. They were designed in a spiral pattern. And so the energy was spiraling up in the room. This is where you kind of get into the feng shui energies, if you will. But I just go in and I'm like, I was getting vertigo.
Yeah.
Right. And so there was a little bit of functional issues that were happening, but mainly the woman was there and she just so wanted to take care of this house. And she had a really hard time letting go. I said, a beautiful family lives here. Your husband has moved on. You can't do anything about your son. It's time to let it go. And so we had a conversation and, she finally moved on. And then, I felt her move. It took some convincing though, because she really loved that house. But yeah, instantaneously the room was totally fine for her.
Wow.
And ever since, it was fantastic.
That's awesome. Those are the types of things that I love too, like that you did it double blind, that you actually can tell that, anytime you have like someone else is able to verify it too, or things like that, it's like, I think a lot of times this type of work, it's just like kind of lumped in with sort of like new age in general, and a lot of that comes with a lot of like hoaxsters and hucksters and just people who are not very serious, or and so it's cool for people to be able to see that there's a tradition that you come from, or that there's these experiences with these people that can kind of verify that, and I think it's really important. But also how cool for that little girl that she gets to, and for the woman to move on and let go too, very nice.
Absolutely.
So I know that, everyone out here, especially we do a show every Thursday where we specifically try to draw in new tactics and practices and experiences for people to actually use in their life, and I know you have some suggestions for people too, as far as their house and how to take care of things and whatnot. So do you want to share some of that with us?
Rephrase that question, if you will.
Sorry. Yeah, I ramble sometimes.
No, that's okay. It's just, I couldn't track it. So it was perfect. I just couldn't track it very well to make pictures. Okay. So bring it again.
Yes. If you have a suggestion for people listening that they can do like in their house, maybe today or tomorrow, that might help energy sort of flow better, what might it be?
Got it. Okay. Absolutely. First of all, clear the clutter. It's kind of like the Marie Kondo way of being. If you guys don't know, that's this beautiful Japanese woman who now has a show, and she has all these, clearing the clutter books. I would love to actually work with her as well, because she's very sensitive to the energies. And I mean, she talks to the house, and I know that's what she's doing. She's not actually talking to the house verbally, but I'm like, I know you're talking to the house and you're talking to the spirit of the house. So it's important to kind of learn to be one with the house. A house does have a soul. All the items in the house have energy that's attached to it, whether it's big or small, positive or negative. So anything that you're holding on to that you just have I've walked by it a million times, I just don't love it. Then, if you're not really sure, then ask why you're holding on to it. put it in a bag or a box and hold off, for a while, but let go of those things that are not bringing you joy and peace and tranquility. You don't need to go down to the studs, but just let go of the visual clutter, the mental clutter, the emotional clutter. And then when you do that, and just do room by room or drawer by drawer, spend 5 minutes. You don't need to overhaul your house, but just do it slowly when you're bored, or like, okay, hey, there's commercial on. Okay, I'm just going to do this drawer. And it feels really good. I used to be really cluttered growing up. And now I'm really the opposite. I'm kind of OCD about everything. But when everything is in its place, then it's like, wow, then I can really appreciate the energies in the room, the eyes. It's like, imagine living in not necessarily a museum, but the energy that a museum gives of everything has its place. Everything is designed for you to look in a specific way, going through maybe a Japanese or an English garden. It's 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 created with the viewer and the experiencer in mind, right? So treat your house as such. Treat it as you would love it, and not just a place to throw your hat and crash. And when you do that, then you bring more positive energy into the spaces. You will love your spaces more. Maybe you need to shift furniture. If you need to shift furniture, just imagine eddies of water going through a room. So if you have furniture right in front of the door, it's going to stop that energy. So imagine how you want that energy to flow. If it's too much furniture, toss it out. Simplify, make it clean, and let the air through, let the energy flow. Final thing, this is not too much information already, but what I like to do is, if I go into a room and I go, it just feels out of balance. What I do is I look at the five elements of, water, fire, metal, rock, and maybe glass, if you will. And I see what's out of balance. Like, is it too echoey? Maybe you put a carpet down or some curtains up. Is it too dark? Right? Maybe bring the curtains up or lighten the colors. Is it too dead? Maybe you need to add some reflection through metal and glass. So it's like, I just look at what feels out of balance. If I'm anxious and, feeling shattery, then maybe there's too much glass and too much reflectivity. So that's the main thing that I kind of go to after I've cleared everything. Everything's kind of feeling good. Then I kind of look at the materials.
I love that. I love that feeling of, or that idea of doing it with the five elements too, and specifically sort of feeling into that energy and like, how's that in this room? Okay.
Yeah.
And I think too, one of the things that you might find that you've kind of mentioned is that there's objects that might hold sort of energy, or people might be attached to them, like the house and the woman. And as you're doing this, I can imagine you might find a few things and be like, whoa, wait, this feels weird. Like, why is this even here? How did it get here? I remember I found a bracelet once, and I just saw it and picked it up. But as I was picking it up, something in my brain told me this isn't for you. And I was like, yeah, but it's a free bracelet. And I took it anyway. And so this is one of the many lessons to trust your instincts, right? Or listen to yourself, especially when you're warning yourself. Because it took me some time to, again, come back to that and be like, this is the thing, and get it out of my house. But you might, in doing this kind of clearing and reassessment of your objects and items, find some things like that you had forgotten or just didn't notice or whatever, and get rid of some of that energy too.
Yes. Things that can hold a lot of energy, as I said, jewelry, wedding dresses apparently as well. There was an experience that my husband had experienced. When we were dating, it took me a while to kind of share with him a little bit of what I do. And he's very linear and so forth. And he goes, I just don't know. I mean, and every time I try and bring up a little story or a cool client story, he would just eyes glaze over, and he's just like, it's just not where he was, right? And so anyway, we'd been dating. We went into an antique store. And in this antique store, I would get a headache every time I would walk in the front door for about 15 feet, and then it would get better. And I go, oh, Lord, there's something over there that's just a problem. And so anyway, we go through the antique store, we're wandering back, and my husband puts on a World War II helmet. And he puts it on for about a nanosecond and practically throws that thing off.
Wow.
And he gets a full visual of being in war on a specific location. I mean, he got the full thing. And I'm just like, oh my God. And he looks at me, he goes, this is what I experienced. And I'm just going, yeah.
Like,
he
yep.
goes, is this possible? Is this possible, Meredith? And I go,
You're like, that's what I do.
It is.
Yeah.
I know. And I'm like, there's a glimmer of hope, but we got married. So he believed me enough that I wasn't totally crazy. And, but it does happen with these things, including knives. I've noticed I've had to clear a few knives over the years that they hold a lot of energy, very personal item. And even, I mean, if you think on the East Coast, I've cleared some houses, where I would do a scan. This is all done remotely, but I did a scan of the house and I go, there's something hidden in the wall to the left of the door. And a lot of times it was old custom, you would put something in the wall as you're constructing it. Often it would be a shoe or something like that. And so those hold a lot of energy as well. So when you're renovating, just if you come across things or things start to move around, sometimes entities or energies are maybe not quite so happy.
They're like reawakened. I go, what's this? I've been slumbering for so long. Yes, well, that's really cool. And I know a lot of people, there's different traditions, and I think they all have so much value. And I know some people feel like you have to go in person and do this work in the actual house. And I do think that you might even agree could be more powerful if that was necessary, but you can do it remotely. And I think it's really important for people to understand, there's no limitation in time and space for energy to transfer and information to transfer. We know that even the materialist scientists know this, that energy and information can actually transport. They've done it. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So people can feel confident, going forward with that, especially if they're feeling this whole conversation, which I know a lot of the audience is like, Meredith is so cool and let's do it, that they can reach out to you and you can help them with a lot. But tell us about the book. We haven't even talked about the book, Becoming Ridiculously Awesome. Who doesn't want that? That's like my type of title. I really like that title. Good job.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So this book took me under a year to write because I was just on fire. But I will tell you, as I was actually working on an article today, I was recounting a story with a friend of mine on what started this book. And I don't know if I've ever really talked about it before. And that was the impetus for this book. Was we had a nephew stay with us who he was just going through some stuff. And so he was staying in a little cottage in our backyard, which was super cool. And we were helping him throughout the year. I helped him with a specific project. And so my husband says, why don't you just write her a thank you note? And so he wrote me a thank you note on a beautiful stationery, but it was one sentence long. Thank you so much for helping me with my budget for college. And I go, that was nice. But he was over 20 and I'm going, we need to help him with some of these things, right? And we loved helping him and connecting with him more. And so my husband and I had said, you know what? We're going to do a little project. We go, we're going to have you write 3 thank you notes every day for 2 weeks.
That's cool.
And every morning they have to be addressed and stamped and ready to go. And then you're going to ship them out every single day. And he's like, really? And I'm like, absolutely. And so we thought we were just going to help him with thank you notes and, become the Emily Post, of the century. And anyway, so at the end of the 2 weeks, we were chatting with him and he said, so how was it? And he goes, well, it was really good. It took me a while to figure out, like after the first 7 or 8 and then 10, 15, like 42 envelopes and letters is a lot of people. And we had the rule that you couldn't duplicate people.
Oh, I like that.
Thank you, Mom, for doing my laundry, and thank you, Mom, for feeding me. It had to be different people. So here's the thing that happened was I was thinking, great, that he was just going to learn how to write a really sincere thank you note and start to appreciate gratitude more, right? But the next thing he said made me cry and tear up. And he says, I said, so how was it? And he goes, towards the end, it was really hard to find people, but it made me really search into my past. And he said, it made me realize how many people loved me.
Oh.
And it was just, wait, what? And I go, here is this lesson that he had learned by just simply writing thank you notes. And the next day I started writing on my front porch. And that was the first chapter. It's later on in the book, but it's a book about gratitude and the importance of it, and and connecting into that. So that was the impetus of my book, and then it started to go into my journey, where I started and where I ended up. And so it was a really joy to write, and recall all these things, and to help people who are just starting on their journey of asking those questions and going, maybe there's more. And so this is book for those who are asking that question and really wanting the answers. If you want real answers, they are in there.
I love that. I love, again, how simple it is. Even if it's not always easy, you at least can see what the practice is, what the actual answer is, and how it can help. And of course, this gratitude experience and chapter would turn into you describing your own journey, because I'm sure as you look back, you have all of this gratitude for your own teachers along the way and moments along the way, and all the people who loved you. And, that sparks, I'm sure, as you're writing this about your nephew.
Absolutely. Yes.
That's awesome. And like I said before the show, other people maybe didn't hear it, but I was posting today, in my various places about the show tonight, and I had a certain fan like, oh, I just bought that book. I'm so excited. I was like, cool. So clearly, more people might want to grab this book too. It sounds really, really great. But what are your hopes for where people go? We kind of briefly touched on the trauma of the year of a global nature, and but what do you hope happens with people and how they move forward from here, and where we could get to? What do you think?
My hope is that people can find their internal joy, because if you don't have that, you really don't have anything. When you live for somebody else, when you are trying to achieve a life according to someone else's rules and so forth, it will not be as joyful or genuine. And I think ultimately we are here to find our true essence. It might take lifetimes, but it doesn't have to. It really doesn't. But you've got to put in the work and really look in that mirror. But my hope is that people will find that joy, and that it doesn't take years, that they don't have to live where they are and being stuck and frustrated and whatever it is. I mean, it could be, hey, I'm tired of stubbing my toe, to, hey, I am really depressed and anxious and I can barely walk outside my door. I have so much heart for those people, because I've been there. I've been through so much crap of my own. But I know that you can do it. I want people to not just find joy, but their own power, their own truth, and understand that life is actually simpler than we make it out to be. And it can be that. And here's the cool thing is, when you find at least the pathway to that, and as you start to build on it, the cool thing is, the brighter you become, the more attractive you become. To have a new friend, right? The conversations are easier. You find joy in the smaller things. You find the joy of just being in that moment, whatever it is, whether it's, you have a flat, your tire is flat and it's raining and it's in the middle of the night, and you go, here I am. Well, this sucks, but you know what? Something's going to come along, or something's going to happen. And when you open yourself to that opportunity, then it will. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. And I'm not saying you're never going to have a flat tire on the side of the road. But let me give you an example. I remember I was in college and I was flying back east to school. My mom is driving her car and driving me to the airport, and she gets a flat tire. And so she's spinning and she goes, where do I pull over? There's no place to pull over. And I go, and I just saw in my mind's eye where she needed to go. And I go, take the next exit. And I go, I know her rim's probably gonna get totally hosed here, but just do it. And so 100 yards, she takes the exit and there's a station, a gas station. And I'm just filtering and seeing in my mind's eye what needs to happen. And I'm looking and I go, how the heck am I going to get to the airport? I need to get there now. Who is at the Shell station? Well, there is a little van for taking people to the airport. And this woman is just stepping into the van with her fresh cup of coffee. And I go, are you by chance going to the airport right now? And she goes, why, yes, I am. I go, I need a ride. And she goes, well, come on board, And I said, do I owe you anything? She's like, no, I have to go to the airport anyway. I go, wow. Great. And I go, this is too easy, right? The conscious side is it's too easy. I'm like, no, it's not. When you're in that synchronicity and you're trusting and you're, there, it's awesome. So anyway, and so then I'm like, Mom, I love you. Gotta go. I grabbed my bags and off I was. And it was seamless. And it was really, so it's like when you get more into that trusting and you're a little bit beyond life as a coincidence. And then you're noticing more synchronicity, and then you're noticing more co-creation, and then it becomes really fun. And then you go, what's next? Let's do it.
Bring it.
And all right, bring it. Yes. And so that's what I want for people, is to realize it's not a struggle. It is a struggle now, but once you pop out kind of the other side and understand the true structure of things, nothing can stop you. So whatever you want to have happen, of course, within reason, right? It's going to happen for you.
That's awesome. Yes, it really is possible. And you, whoever you are listening right now, watching right now, you deserve it. You do. So, Meredith, it's been so awesome. What are your final thoughts that you might want to leave people with or share people with? No, I'm sorry. Before that, where can people go to connect with you further? Sites? Where can they get your book? Anything else you might want to share about socials or connection?
Absolutely. So go to my website, livingyourawesome.com. You'll find tons of information, articles, ways to get a hold of me. I am doing a 4-session series right now, and where you get the first one free. And it is just such a great springboard. We'll have a 30-minute consultation to see how we can work together, if it's a great fit. So go to livingyourawesome.com. I'm on Instagram as well, and Facebook, and all over the place. My book's on Amazon. As more and more of you are learning, you can also buy my book on my site, and then that's where I can write a beautiful note to you and inscribe it and mail it to you directly, which I love to do. I love sending that energy and putting that into the book and sending to you. So that's how you can get hold of me, and let's, start the conversation. And where do you want to go? So that is my plug. And if you want to look at my book and you're unfamiliar, on Amazon, you can see here, Becoming Ridiculously Awesome. Who doesn't want that? Oh, it's kind of dying. But anyway, it wants to disappear. But that's my book. And I would love for you guys to, if you're kind of on the fence, want to learn more about me, read my book, and then we'll continue the conversation at just the right time.
I love that cover with the little girl in the booster pack. That's really cool.
That's
it's really a great metaphor and symbolic of what's going on. And I second the buying the book direct and getting the inscription. You're never going to regret that. You're always going to love it. It's like, I know that you're very similar to me, and that inscription is actually somewhat kind of almost channeled from whatever they need to hear or message to go to them. So you're actually starting with the journey even then, I think, when you open that book. So I highly support that choice. And now, what are your final thoughts that you might want to leave people with?
God, my final thoughts is, this last year has shown us what we need to work on, and where we can go. So don't get stuck in the past and all the frustrations, but it just is an opportunity for us to go, well, that's not working anymore. And so where do I want to go next? And so look forward into the future with excitement and bliss, because you can make it whatever you want.
It's even very freeing. I love that view of it. So beautiful. And fellow travelers of the path, it is a beautiful thing. And this has been your analog, electric, concentric dose of wisdom according to the Huna healer, Meredith Herrenbruck. Meredith, thank you so much for being on Rogue Ways tonight. It's a pleasure to talk with you.
All right. Thank you so much.
And everyone rises and falls with the tide of their personal gravity wells. And the stars of our companion souls deepen or lighten those gravity wells alongside us, whether we like it or not. But the truth is, we are never alone, never have been alone, and never will be alone. And thank God we fly through our personal skies in a constellation of connection, because it would be a pretty long trip if we were the only star in the sky. So reflect brightly the starlight you find around you and propel yourself even further into the beauty that awaits you. And on the way, travel well, aim for balance, and always look inside at first. Mwah.
Domestic terrorists.
They're not wearing masks?
Domestic terrorists. It's that basic, it's that simple.
And the question is, how are we going to really almost deprogram these people?
These extremists, authoritarians, fascists, bigots, racists, nativists, even libertarians.
They're not wearing masks?
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories. Oversensitize them to what we have to do.
Potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
We've made it our mission to limit the spread of this disease and to limit the risks to lives and to our economy. We've been clear from the beginning that getting together in groups outside of your household that is not permitted is not allowed.
And we need to make it clear to them that the vaccine is the ticket back to pre-pandemic life. And the window to do that is very narrowing.
This nation, this idea called America, was and always will be a new world. Our new world.
Today we're taking steps to confront not just the gun crisis, but what is actually a public health crisis.
They're not wearing masks?
You know the old expression about snitches? Well, in this case, snitches get rewards. We want to thank you for turning folks in and making sure we are all safe.
Are you proposing taking away their guns, and how would this work? I am.